So picture this. It's the winter of 1991. An entire empire is collapsing. And as the Soviet flag comes down over the Kremlin for the very last time, one of the most secretive buildings on the entire planet is unlocked. A library of forbidden knowledge that was opened and then, just as quickly, sealed right back up again. You see, for 70 years, the Soviet state was obsessed with documenting everything. Every covert op, every weird scientific discovery, every paranormal investigation. And they stored it all in this massive underground labyrinth known simply as the Special Archive. This wasn't a place for preserving history. It was a place to make sure it was buried. Forever.
All right, so what exactly was in this place? Let's dig into what made this archive so incredibly different, starting with the absolutely terrifying things rumored to be locked away in its vaults.
Okay, so a special archive, it's not what you're probably thinking. It's not like a normal government archive at all. Its whole purpose is permanent burial. Information goes in, but it is never, ever supposed to come out. The whole point is to basically erase things from history itself.
And this really shows you a totally different way of thinking about secrets. I mean, in places like the US, there's a system, right? It might be slow, but eventually stuff gets declassified, you can file a request. The Soviet Special Archive was the complete opposite of that. A one-way street, a black hole for information, and it was guarded by armed soldiers.
So for decades, you'd hear these whispers, stories from defectors about what was locked away in there. They talked about weaponized telepathy, about the entire occult libraries of Nazi Germany being shipped in and cataloged. Official military reports on UFOs and bizarre deep-sea encounters. I mean, it all sounded like science fiction, right? Pure myth. Until, for a brief moment, those doors actually opened.
And get this wasn't some dusty, forgotten warehouse out in the middle of nowhere. No, this archive was built right into the heart of the Soviet security state. We're talking collections held in the infamous Lubyanka KGB headquarters and the super-secretive Podolsk military base. These were the most secure buildings in the entire country.
But then, in the early 90s, everything changed. For this really brief, totally chaotic moment, the unthinkable happened. Western researchers were actually let in. People started calling it the archival gold rush.
And I mean, this whole thing happened in a flash. In '91, Yeltsin opens the archives, as a sign of this new transparency. By 1992, researchers are pouring into Moscow. But just a few years later, by the late 90s, the political atmosphere just hardened. And that tiny window of opportunity? It was slammed shut. Just like that.
The whole process for the researchers who got inside was, honestly, frantic and bizarrely low-tech. There were barely any photocopiers. You had historians sitting at desks, asking clerks for these top-secret files, and then just copying them by hand with a pen and paper, or snapping photos as fast as they could. It was a completely impossible race against time. We're talking tens of millions of files.
So after all that frantic work, what did they have to show for it? Well, after years, researchers figured they had only managed to see and copy less than 1% of what was actually in there. Think about that, less than 1%. And yet, in that tiny fraction, the stuff they found was absolutely staggering. For instance, they found official Soviet military documents detailing these desperate attempts to understand and maybe even reverse engineer crashed objects of unknown origin. Just try to imagine what could possibly be hiding in the other 99%.
And then, just as suddenly as it all began, it was over. That brief moment of openness just ended, abruptly. The doors to that labyrinth were sealed up again.
Which brings us to the central mystery of this whole story. Why? Why the panic? Why would the new Russian government slam the doors shut on the history of a state that didn't even exist anymore?
Well, the official reason they gave was pretty bland. They said it was to protect the personal privacy of citizens mentioned in the files. But, there's a much more compelling theory out there. It suggests those files held a lot more than just old history. It suggests they held scientific and technological secrets about energy, propulsion, psychological warfare that are still incredibly dangerous and relevant even today.
So they formed this new commission to protect state secrets. The reading rooms were emptied out, all the requests were denied, and any researchers who tried to show up were just met by armed guards. And just like that, the brief moment of transparency was gone.
Here we are, left with this huge, enduring mystery. We know this library exists. We even got a little peek at the index, the table of contents.
But the books themselves, they're locked away, probably forever.
So, what's the situation today? Well, the archive is totally sealed. Trying to get in is a criminal offense. We know where it is. We even have some of the file names from that short-lived gold rush, but the actual contents, a complete and total black hole. I mean, it's just such a tantalizing thought, isn't it? You've got miles and miles of shelving, holding the answers to some of the biggest mysteries of the 20th century, and it's all just sitting there, silently, right under the streets of Moscow, completely untouchable.
You know, the story of the Special Archive really shows you something important. It shows you that history isn't just a bunch of stuff that happened a long time ago. It's a resource, something so powerful that some governments might fear it even more than weapons. Because at the end of the day, maybe the most important stories of all are the ones that someone tries really, really hard to stop you from ever reading.